Hidden in New York's urban canopy are pockets of the city's natural history. Even though today buildings tower over the native New Yorker, 400 years ago, a rich abundance of tree species dominated the whole city. Development Officer for the Natural Areas Conservancy, Bram Gunther, is an expert on New York forest and tree conservation.
82% of our canopy are native species, the kind of species that you would have found in 1609.
Lenape territory spanned across states like New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New York, and Delaware. The Lenapes of New York settled in the island of Manhattan, now known as Manhattan. The Lenape trusted in the power of nature. They considered themselves its protectors by managing surrounding natural canopies and by adapting to its chaotic nature.
Their relationship with nature was different through their philosophies and their religions. And their capacity to really change the land was less significant because there was just less of a population with less technology or less industrialization.
Today, 20% of tree canopy has gone extinct in New York. Along with climate change and pollution, the tree canopies of New York have another predator.
The elm is essentially extinct. The chestnut is essentially extinct. Hemlocks are essentially extinct, right? So oaks and maples, for example, and sweet gums have done very well.
Dutch and English colonists weren't the only thing that invaded Manhattan. Between the 1620s and the 1670s, the colonists brought along foreign invasive species that caused the extinction of tree species in New York native canopy. Some of these invasive species include insects like the gypsy moth, plants like the giant hogweed, animals like Eurasian boar, and fungus species like the oak wilt.
So species that have come from other parts of the world that don't have any natural predators in this area, and so they just thrive unchecked. And they are the biggest threat to our native species. And just so you know, you will never, ever, ever defeat invasive species, whether they're plants or whether they're beetles or whether they're a fungus or a bacteria.
These invasive species undermine an ecosystem by altering or destroying native food sources. Because they remain unchallenged by local flora and fauna, they reproduce aggressively, thus taking over natural resources in the environment. Eventually, the invasive foreign species colonizes an area and pushes the native canopy to extinction. This, in turn, can destabilize the native ecosystem.
We were just kind of like covering everything in asphalt, putting in like monocultures of like just a ton of London plane trees or Norway maples, things that we now know maybe don't thrive in certain conditions or can be invasive.
Humans can also be invasive species. In New York, for example, engineers, architects, and government officials shaved off most of the native landscape to create an urban canopy. As a result, they further facilitated the extinction of New York's native tree species. Even as city planners tried to beautify New York streets with foreign plant species, they neglected to understand the consequences that would have on native species.
You know, I think it's a really interesting moment for New York City because we know what we had maybe hundreds of years ago. We know what we did in the interim that was maybe not so beneficial. And we're starting to think as open space professionals about really the future of New York City open spaces and how we can find that balance of trying to bring things back to a place that is, you know, I think does bring in sort of the history and the rich diversity of native plants that once were present in the five boroughs, but that we've kind of done our best to get rid of, and now we're trying to undo that work. So it's a fascinating time.
Today, the New York City Parks Department is partnering with nonprofits like New York for Parks, hiring ecologists and horticulture specialists to responsibly beautify neighborhood green spaces and parks with flora. This includes clearing out spaces to plant native species and helping local park organizations who take care to manage the foreign invasive species. While the future may have once seemed bleak for New York natural canopy, today the future burns bright for native tree species restoration in the city.